Good morning. Welcome to Joyous Earth's second live with the lovely Lyndall. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming back and watching this again. Today, we're going to be speaking with Lyndall about specifically dogs. Is that right, Lyndall, or more cats as well?
Good. Yeah, mainly dogs, yeah.
Mainly dogs, about their diet and their gut health and how important that is to every aspect of their life. So there's a lot of different information out there. There's a lot of different kinds of foods. So it's really, really easy to get things mixed up and have to change things a lot. So I'm really, really appreciative, Lyndall, today for you to be able to be here and just give us some good basic advice. So where do we start? We got our puppy, I suppose. Do we start with puppies?
Yeah, well, I guess we start with puppies in the sense that it's important, like like it is with our own children, to get to get their health correct right from the get-go. And from a holistic perspective, certainly when we're talking about diet from the way that I would recommend it, I don't actually break it down into life cycles per se, but you are right in that I love getting a puppy and getting them going right from the beginning, because it's not just about getting the right food into them. It's about making sure that we build that gut health right from the very start, and then we're going to have less problems as we move on. I suppose, as you said, Kelly, there's just so much information on the internet, particularly about how to feed your dogs, whether it's dry food or any sort of commercial food, whether it's a cooked diet, a raw diet, a prey model. There are many different options, I suppose, and it's extremely confusing even for somebody who's supposed to know about it. So I think what I work on in every aspect of my work is always looking to Mother Nature, because she knows the answers. And if we do look to dogs in the wild, we know that they do consume a raw diet, and that is biologically how they've been. They're built. They're biologically built to eat raw food, to eat meat, bones, fat, organ meats, all those sorts of foods that they're just perfectly designed for that. I suppose there's a lot of concern, I suppose, for the new dog owner, like the people, as to whether they're actually going to be getting the right nutrition into their dogs. So they tend to start them off on commercial foods because that's supposed to be complete and balanced. But the reality is that that's really not the best way to go as we move forward. So starting off, I suppose, with that.
So,
and that opens up a Pandora's box.
So you've got a dog that, like say, I've got a 7-year-old dog, and she's really well overweight. She's 50 kilos. She's a big dog anyway. But so if talking to the other people who are maybe starting out with a dog that's older and already been eating, lots of store food, I suppose, for a long time, what kind of ideas do you have for them?
Yeah, sure, Kelly. They're the bulk of the people that I work with. Of course, I don't get a lot of puppies coming in that are starting off. So typically, it's the older dog that has been on commercial food maybe all their life, or maybe they've been on a combination of cooked food and a bit of this and a bit of that. So it's important that. That's probably most people. They've probably dabbled with, something, a combination. So for most of those dogs, we do need to transition them. There is a transitional period. But having said that, Kelly, a lot of people think that it does take a long time to transition a dog, but it doesn't necessarily. That's not necessarily the case unless they have some sort of a serious problem going on. Regardless of that, though, what I tend to say to clients, or even just customers who are wanting general information, is to do that transition over 1 to 2 weeks from whatever diet they're doing now, whether it's a fully commercial diet or whether it's a bit of this and a bit of that, if they're looking to transition onto what I believe is an optimal diet, which is a raw diet, doing that over 7 to 14 days. Now, there's a couple of tools that you can use, I call them tools, that you can use to actually help that process. One of them is bone broth. Now, probably a lot of your listeners would have heard of bone broth. You know, if anyone's ever done paleo, it's very big in the paleo movement. But bone broth is one of my favourite things to use with dogs, and I would say that 99% of my doggy clients get put onto bone broth for various reasons, but it is a really great transitional tool because it's very nourishing and healing for the gut, and it's perfect to take the gut from one type of food and without too much of an upset, because traditionally you'll get dogs that get a little bit of diarrhea or vomiting when they change diet. So bone broth is a great tool, and you can use that to help them, and there are a couple of other things you can do as well.
So what is a raw diet? What's a raw diet? Why is it better?
Yeah, okay. So raw diet, and there are a couple of ways you can do it, but the way that I generally recommend it is a raw diet's based around feeding approximately 75% of the diet of raw meat, bones, fat, and a little bit of organ meat, and about 25% of plant matter, which is for me like leafy greens that are prepared in a certain way. There are other things you can bring into the diet, things like raw eggs and fish and things like that. But the basis is that raw meat and bone, organ meat, and then the vegetable matter. Now, that's prepared in a certain way. So generally what we recommend is feeding, we try to get most clients to feed a raw bone every day, and that has to be a bone that's suitable for the dog. There's a couple of bones we don't recommend, marrow bones, which are those very large marrow bones we don't recommend because they can crack teeth, and we don't recommend chicken necks, but other than that, pretty much any other bone is...
Wow, that's what I give Siren, chicken necks and big marrow bones.
Yeah.
So not both.
Yeah. Yeah. Interestingly, most of my clients do. It's either chicken necks or if they've ever fed bones, they're the two bones, and they're what that they've been feeding. They're the ones that we don't recommend giving.
Okay,
but there are a lot of other bones. Well, the marrow bones, as I said, they're the hard bones, so they do crack teeth, and often you'll find a dog will crack a tooth and you won't be aware of it. The other thing is that the chicken necks. You know, we do recommend organic bones. The chicken necks, it's extremely hard to get them organic, and they are quite a fatty bone with a fair bit of bacteria. So certainly factory farm ones are not ideal. So we try to steer away from the chicken neck thing. But there are a myriad of other bones that you can be feeding your dog that don't fall into those two categories. In addition to that, you're looking at feeding what we call muscle meat, which is mince or meat pieces or something around that provides the muscle meat portion of the diet, and there's obviously fat that will be in that meat as well. Organ meat's only a small amount, maybe only I would only feed that to my own dogs maybe once a week, once a fortnight. It's only about 5% of the diet.
That's can be kidneys, liver, brains, those kind of
things. Yeah. And then your plant matter, which, as I said, for me, generally leafy greens, because they're the most nutrient dense. They give a lot of chlorophyll. They're great for detoxing and alkalizing and all of that. And they only need to be a small part of the diet, but I feel that they're an essential part for dogs to get those trace nutrients that they may not get through the other part of the diet. And that's biologically.
Is there a particular way that you need to, like, I know with the leafy greens, because the dog's gut's quite small, isn't it? It's not very long because it eats meat. Correct. So do you have to mush them up, or is it better juiced, or?
Most of your listeners will be familiar with a vegetable juice that you might make yourself, and you get the lovely juice and you get that pulp that you get that's left over, and that pulp is actually the perfect way to feed vegetables to a dog, in the sense that it's broken. The plant cell wall has been cracked and the nutrients are released from the cell, and your dog can digest that more readily, because, as you say, they've got a short digestive tract, so it's rapid digestion. It needs to be taken in pretty quickly. So that's the way you would prepare it. So
I suppose, and that's lots of fibre too, isn't it, helping them
Yep.
move the
Yeah,
gut through. Yeah. Oh,
that's correct. There's the fibre that would, in a while, that would mimic the fur that they would tend to eat, or the feathers that they'd eat, which would give fibre off the animal that they might be eating. So, yeah.
okay. What kind of things does this, a bad diet cause in a dog? Like,
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's a very long answer. I'll try and shorten it. The reason why I see so many problems these days is that most of it is coming from poor gut health, and I think we all know that for us there's a huge movement now of in humans about having good gut health and how important that is, and dogs are no different. We're seeing exactly the same issues, leaky gut issues and all these sorts of problems, and it really does start with the nutrition, the diet. So if we're feeding the wrong types of foods to the dog that they can't break down properly, over time that's going to create some issues. So we know that grains, for example, which are very much prevalent in your commercial-based foods, your dry and your wet foods, grains like wheat, corn and rice are the three big ones that tend to pop on up in these products, are very problematic because not only do they contain gluten, but rice doesn't contain gluten, but some of them contain gluten, but they have other issues in terms of the breaking down, the body's ability to break that down, and they do create inflammation in the gut. They damage the gut lining, and from there you start to see.
Just not, like, they're not made. They don't go and eat rice, do they? Like, it's not. And if they eat grass or something like that, it's to make themselves vomit, isn't it?
That's generally correct. Yes, they just don't.
Okay.
The body, and so then you start getting a pattern of all sorts of problems, from allergies through to yeast infections to skin problems to all sorts of immune dysfunction, and it just goes on from there, really. So it's really crucial to make sure we're feeding them the right types of foods. So, yeah.
So coming into time values and prices and things like that, because for most people, I know with me, I run 2 businesses, got 3 kids, need to have a life as well. My dog's a big part of that life, obviously. So what's the most economical and the easiest way to be able to incorporate a really good diet? So, I can go next week and not buy my big bag of store-bought food. How do I transition? And
so there's a couple of ways you can do it. Of course, you can make your own raw diet, and I did that for many years. I probably did my own raw feeding for about 15 years. These days, though, it's a lot easier. People can actually buy if you want to call it a pre-made product. Now, there are a lot of these on the market, and a lot of your listeners may know them as BARF, biologically appropriate raw food. There are good ones and bad ones. Now, I've been fortunate enough in the last 5 years to work alongside the Complete Pet Company in Brisbane. That's where my clinic is. And personally, I've actually tried a lot of these pre-made products on my own dogs, just out of, trying to, an easier option for myself. And while a lot of them are convenient, not all of them are as good as they say, because a lot of them are based around non-organic meats, which means that you're purchasing a product that's factory farmed, that contains a lot of chemical residue, and not to mention the ethics behind that, I suppose. So really in clinic, I do only recommend one food, and that's the complete meal, which is produced through the Complete Pet Company here right here in Brisbane. The reason I love it is because it's so simple, it's so convenient, and it's all done for you, but you're getting an absolutely high-grade quality organic product, and you don't really have to think too much about it. So it's basically defrost and serve, and it's probably quicker than opening a tin of Pal, and that provides everything that your dog needs in addition to feeding a raw bone. So there is an option there for your listeners to do something along those lines of actually going and purchasing a frozen product and just using it that way, rather than having to put all the work in. Yeah.
And so if they want to, obviously I've got that up on the thing here. If you want to do a combination, maybe, is there any good dry foods? Any ones that you would recommend above another one?
I'm going to be pretty blunt with that and say
Yeah. I could see that
And
in
I'll
your
tell you
face. You're like, no.
yeah, no, I'm trying to be diplomatic, but no, look, the answer is no, and I'll tell you why. The problem you've got, and this is most of the clients that I see are like this. They come to me and they're doing a 50-50. They're doing half raw, which is usually just meat, and half kibble. And the reason behind the kibble is that they're trying to give that complete and balanced thing, which is a bit of a misnomer. But anyway, what happens when you
Why is that
start
a
to feed?
misnomer? Like, that's
Okay,
why.
so
That's one of the main
it's
reasons
quite
for doing it.
yeah, it's quite misleading. So when you go and buy your bag of food from Woolies or even at the vet, you get your high-end vet products, such,
Yeah.
I'm not going to mention brands, but all the ones that you get in the vet. All of those essentially, they're a processed food. So we know processed food is not ideal. We know that we don't want our children eating McDonald's every day because it's processed food. And it's the same with our dogs. We don't want them feeding on processed food. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that they're very high in grains that we've talked about, the issues around grains for the gut. There are a lot of preservatives and other sorts of ingredients in there that are just not, they do lead to toxicity in the body, and your dog has difficulty digesting them. And the other thing is they're a heat-treated product. So the vitamins and minerals that, if there's anything in there after they heat treat them, are minimal. So you're not getting optimal nutrition. You just cannot get optimal nutrition through food that is processed. It's just not possible. We want to focus on fresh living foods. So that's, the misnomer is that the complete and balanced is not complete and balanced. You're just not getting the level of nutrients that you need for your dog to be really optimally healthy.
I know I had, before my dog now, I had another dog, Staffy, called Daisy. I had her for 15 years. And because she was a Staffy, anything that she ate just caused welts on her. Like within a minute after her eating a piece of chocolate, she'd have a big pussy welt on her. And it was phenomenal to watch that happen, maybe 5 minutes. But so with her, most of her life, she ate, I didn't understand this whole idea. I just knew that I couldn't feed her anything but lamb, chicken. I fed her a little bit of rice to fill it out, and whatever veggies I'd eaten that night, I would put in as well. So for most of her life, that's what she ate. And she lived for a really, really long time. Probably sleeping in my bed helped that too. But so what things like chicken mince, and is that okay? Like that's sort of what I was doing anyway. What other? So you've got your basic, your bones and stuff like that. I'm just trying to make it so that people can actually do it. So really, really good if they can go to Complete Pet and get that, and if they've got the money to do that, and that's fantastic. But if they don't have that, what can they do? Like what? I suppose I'm trying to really bring it back down to a simple thing for them to implement.
Yeah, I think that the simplest form of doing it, as I said, is that meat, bone, and vegetable combination. So if you can think about feeding that bone in the morning, because generally we recommend a twice-a-day feeding, so I would do like a bone in the morning and a main meal at night. That's what clients will do, or most people are used to. So the bone is the morning meal, and that's what I give to my own dogs. They get a bone every morning. That's breakfast. And then for the evening meal, yes, I do feed the complete meal. But when I was doing it myself, what it comprised of was a portion of usually mince. That would be an organic chicken mince or maybe an organic beef mince or something along those lines, depending on what was available. I would always recommend an organic meat for the ethical reasons and also for the cleanness of the meat, for the fact that it's chemical-free. That's really important. And then the vegetable component.
Did you notice a difference with how much you had to feed them? Was there a difference with the organic rather than the non-organic meat to just the nutrient density, or is there anything there? Because you've done this for a long time. You get how this works, hey?
Yeah, so there is a formula we work on when we're working out how much to feed, which is generally 2 to 3% of a dog's ideal body weight, as in ideal if they are the correct weight at the time.
Okay.
So you do work, if they're overweight, you need to bring it down, of course. So you work on that, and I generally would work on the 2%. But having said that, you are right. Like once you do feed an organic diet, you do notice that the amount of food that they need to eat is less, and that's just because, as you say, they're getting a nutrient-dense product that's, that's higher grade. So you may even find that, say, for example, if you're normally having to feed 400 grams of food a day with a normal raw diet that's non-organic, it might be that you only need 300 to 350 grams of an organic diet, just depending on your dog's needs. So, but yeah, to keep it simple, it's that bone in the morning, main meal at night, which is the meat-vegetable combination. Now, the vegetables, if your listeners are doing it themselves, what they can do is make it up in batches and freeze it. I used to actually freeze it into small amounts, like ice cube trays or little containers or something like that when I used to do it myself. I used to do that every second Sunday. That was my Sunday job. And you can actually make up a large amount and then just defrost that and add it into the meat as you require each night. Or other clients in the past, when I've recommended this, have just done the combination of meat and vegetable and then frozen that together as a.
That's what I used to do. Yeah.
So that's probably the easiest way. And into that, you can add things like a little bit of good fat, whether it's a bit of coconut oil or fish oil or something like that, if you want to just add that bit of extra into it too as you feed it. As you defrost to feed it, you would add some oil into it.
And is there a difference for, say, puppies to adult dogs? To what you
sure.
and what you want to get?
Yeah, puppies, obviously you need to feed a little bit more. They are growing, they're growing, so they do need a higher amount of calcium. They need more bone content. They need a little bit more protein and definitely more fat. So there are certain meats like kangaroo you wouldn't feed to a puppy. It's way too lean. If you did feed it exclusively, you might just feed it occasionally. So, you are feeding closer to the 4% of their body weight or definitely you're going to need to feed more, and as they grow, when they hit 12 months, we do move them to more of an adult regime, and they can go on that adult protocol because they've done the bulk of their growing for most breeds. But the bone content's really important, and a lot of people do forget that in the early months they don't feed puppies bones, and that is essential to get those joints really strong and healthy, and not to have joint issues down the track. So. And then certainly as dogs age, you can be looking at cutting the food down or looking at leaner proteins like kangaroo, etc.
So is there anything, like, because I know that you're really interested in and want to talk about the gut health, so what there do we not know about gut health that you'd like us to know?
Well, I think that most people probably, certainly if they're feeding commercial foods, which is probably still the bulk of dog owners in Australia, I probably have a dog walking around with some sort of gut issue, whether it's a full-blown issue, whether it's just a small issue, it's going to be there. And that's just by nature of the foods that are being fed, as well as other influences that we won't go into today. But in terms of the processed food, that really has a significant effect on the gut health. And so I suppose my mission is, because I'm so passionate about the gut health, is try and get as many dogs as possible onto a more appropriate diet. So that's the first thing, is to get them onto the appropriate diet. For dogs that have very minor issues, sometimes just transitioning onto a good diet will just sort that out by itself. You can use bone broth as a tool to help that, as we mentioned before.
So how do they do that? How do they implement the bone broth to help them with that transition?
Yeah, so it's literally actually giving that daily. It's a daily thing that you would give, depending on the weight of the dog. It can be anything from maybe only 20 or 30 mils a day for a very small dog, right through to a cup and a half a day if we're talking a really large breed.
So not the bones though, like you take the bones out because they've been cooked.
Yes, that's exactly right. So it's a bone broth is basically you've got raw bones. Usually you use apple cider vinegar to draw out everything that's in the bone into the liquid, and then some filtered water. That's the basis of a broth. You slow cook that for 24 hours or up to 48 hours in some cases, and then you would throw away the bones that often are disintegrating anyway, and then you'll have a beautiful gelatinous broth that will you can keep it in the fridge for a few days or freeze it. Excuse me. And you would just feed that. Add that as a liquid or even a gelatinous broth into the food, or even offer it as a liquid. Excuse
We've
me.
got a
So
question here from Tanika.
sure.
She would love to know if, okay, I'll just read the question. If I've never fed raw before, should I transition to raw slowly? We've discovered that, but we'll talk about that again. And what's the best bones to feed a staffy who gulps to make sure that they don't choke on their bones?
Yeah, great questions. And they're really common questions I get too. So in terms of transitioning, you look to transition over about 7 to 14 days. Now, depending on what you're already feeding, if you are currently feeding 100% commercial, say a dry food or dry and wet combination, what I would say to people is go from 100% a day to, say, 75% commercial, and then start to add in about 25% raw, but also use your bone. Yep. So a staffy, typically 20 to 30 kilos, somewhere in that frame of weight, depending on how big they are. Probably a good half a cup, even 3/4 of a cup of broth a day added into that. And then over a couple of days you would do that, and then you would take it down to, say, 50% of the commercial to 50% raw, then 25% of the commercial to 75% raw, and then 0 to 100. So that would happen over about 2 weeks, or even less than that, even a week if the dog is generally healthy. And just using broth in that transitional period as that tool to get them from there, from A to B, basically. In terms of bones for staffies, I know what they're like. They love their food and they need to eat quickly. So I would generally recommend a roux tail as one of the best bones. We do have those. We do sell those a lot too. Because the reason I love those is because they've got a lot of beautiful meat. They're a meaty bone, but they've also a really fully edible bone that encourages the whole jaw. It uses all of the teeth, which is important. And it's extremely difficult for any dog to choke on a roux tail because of the shape of it. It's a bit like a vertebra, so it's actually difficult to choke on. Things like chicken necks and those sort of smaller bones, chicken wings would not be, the staffies might just eat them way too quickly. As I said, we didn't want to do chicken necks anyway. So a roux tail, or even a good-sized organic beef bone that was, that had a bit of meat on it as well, you could use. But we have a variety of bones that we recommend for staffies or for any dog. So.
And so is that on your website, or is that with the Complete Pet?
On the Complete Pet, you can have a look. Yeah, sure.
Okay, put that back up again. Where am I? There. Okay, so thank you, Tanika, legend. I understand the whole staffy thing. I had one for a very long time. She was beautiful. So what else is there? Let's go into sort of the supplement side of things. So yeah, what do you recommend with foods and stuff? So if you know that your dog has been that your dog's been at the beach heaps and just probably a little bit dehydrated, or I don't know, what kind of things do you come across there with adding extras in when needed?
Yeah, I used to be a really big supplement person, but I have found over the years, particularly with, now that I'm working specifically with dogs, that less is more. So what I do is I try to make sure that they're getting the right diet and getting that balance nutritionally from that perspective. And as I said, a lot of the time that's all that you need. Now, in terms of general supplementation, if we're not talking anything really therapeutically specific, I think that you will need to, in some cases, add some extra fat or oils, good fats into the diet, depending on how you're doing the diet. So that I generally would recommend things like organic coconut oil, a good high-grade wild caught fish oil, such as a blend or salmon oil, or even a good quality Australian hemp oil. We're starting to use that a lot more. Hemp or
I
chia
use that
oil.
in my clinic too. Like for humans, I use hemp oil a lot. Yeah, fantastic for joints and any inflammation. Really good.
Yeah. I've moved away years ago from flaxseed oil, and the reason for that is that it's not easy for a dog to digest flaxseed oil. So I don't find I get good results with flax. Yeah, but any of those oils that I've mentioned can be added in. The dosage is weight dependent, so it's a bit hard to give a dose, but it does range from about a teaspoon up to a tablespoon, depending on the oil. That's probably an ongoing supplement that you can give, especially if you are making your own raw diet. In terms of other nut supplements, I suppose a really general all-round one would be a super green, something like a spirulina or, something along those lines. But having said that, I don't even recommend people give their dogs that as an ongoing thing. I might only use that for a short period of time, for a couple of months at a time. So that we don't create imbalance and then allow the body to rest again. I certainly don't recommend kelp as a general rule, which I know a lot of pet food companies are still putting kelp in their raw foods. We're seeing a thyroid epidemic, an issue with hypothyroid, which is low thyroid function, and also other thyroid issues. And I believe it's a lot to do with the over-prescription of things like kelp and other products like that. So although in short term...
What would people be noticing for them to need to come and see you? What are the signs of something like that?
There are lots of signs with thyroid. The classic ones are things like weight gain, fatigue and low energy. You might see a symmetrical fur loss, like hair loss on either side of the body, which is symmetrical. That can indicate other issues as well, but that's one thing, or hair loss. Ongoing and stubborn infections like yeast infections. You can have sudden mood changes from a very placid dog to quite an aggressive or very reactive dog. There can be other behavioural changes. So it can manifest in a whole range of ways. If there are any funny sorts of symptoms like that going on, it's always good to get some, to have that checked out, because I am seeing so many dogs with thyroid problems these days. It's just incredible. So,
wow.
Yeah. So that's why I'm sort of not a big fan of keeping a dog on something like kelp on the long term.
So if somebody wanted, because we're over the half an hour mark. Today it feels like it's 5 minutes. It's crazy. But if people want a hand, how do they get hold of you? So I'll have your obviously your website link up on there. But what do you offer in way of being able to give people a hand and helping them with this?
Yeah, so certainly people can come and see me in clinic and have a full consultation where we will go through, the whole thing, a full naturopathic consult, and that can address obviously any issues with thyroid or any issues at all, but it can also help people with the diet, the dietary, dietary side of things as well. But if people are just wanting general information, they can certainly jump onto my Facebook page, or they can email me. I've got a lot of people that just will send me an email and say, hey, look, got a quick question. Is there something that you can help me with? Now, if it's just a quick question, I'm quite happy to answer that. If I feel it's something that needs more support, then I would suggest a consultation. But my email address, I'm not sure, that's definitely on my website. It's lyndall.pinch@gmail.com. People can email me there and just put through a quick inquiry that way as well, and I'm quite happy to help people that way too. I do post frequently on Facebook, and you can obviously get a lot of information.
So what's your Facebook? We'll put it underneath here, but what's your Facebook page for everybody to have a look at?
Facebook.com//Canine Vitality, and I'm posting on there most days, so people can message me there as well. I can send you through, they can send me through information, and I can respond back to them that way as well. So there's a few different ways. A lot of people do that as well. They'll just send a quick message.
Locally, you're in Bribie, aren't you? So North Brisbane?
I live at Bribie, but my clinic's in Nogra, which is North Brisbane, and I'm there 3 days a week, or people can do phone consults as well.
I was going to say, can they do online and phone consults with you?
Yeah.
Okay. So before we go, again, I know I've already asked you this, but what's the main take home you want people to have for understanding how to keep their dogs healthy naturally with the diet?
Yeah, I think the biggest point is to always remember that dogs, as I said, look to Mother Nature. So dogs are built differently to humans. They're not they're not built in the way that we are, and they do need a certain diet. So don't let your listeners be fooled by that marketing that's out there that says commercial food is best, because we know it's not. A raw food diet is the way that dogs eat in the wild, so that's really the way that we should be feeding them at home, even in a domestic situation. And once we do that, where 80% of the job is done, you're going to be having a dog that if you did nothing else with your dog, that alone is a great insurance policy for long-term health. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Once again, you're awesome, Lyndall. And everybody will be back next week on the Thursday. Yep. Today we're doing it on the Wednesday because I'm taking my little man to the zoo tomorrow. So 11 o'clock next Thursday. And what are we talking about next Thursday, Lyndall? Is it the ticks and fleas?
I think we'll go into that side of it and have a look at some of the problems associated with that, and of which there are many, and also some of the alternatives, because that is the biggest question, I guess, aside from diet, is what can I do about this whole flea, tick, worming thing? I don't want to use chemicals, but I'm not comfortable. I'm not, I'm nervous about anything else. So I'd really like to cover that and reassure your listeners about that, and share some information about how that can be, overcome naturally.
And so we'll I'm going to order some worming stuff from you. I saw you had a special on it. So
yes.
If anybody this week watch this and they're thinking about getting their dogs wormed, just hold up and wait and let us, we'll have a conversation about it next week, and maybe you can get those products from Lyndall, because I know how amazing they are. Okay, beautiful woman.
No problem. All right, Kelly, it's great to talk, and we will touch base next week.
Yes, we'll see you. Same time, different day. Next Thursday it'll be. Okay, awesome viewers. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.